yayQuery, unicorns, rainbows, and sparkles too. So come on, let's go, 'cause we just cornified you.
Welcome to the 14th episode of the yayQuery podcast. Here's looking at you, Black History Month.
Hello, and welcome to episode 13, the 14th episode of the yayQuery podcast, brought to you by TinyCDN and Devotee. We are going to jump right into some news for this week. First thing that I wanted to tell you was that JavaScript Conference up in DC has announced that they have a venue, and I'm excited that it's the exact same venue as last year.
What JavaScript Conference?
What JavaScript Conference? The JavaScript Conference.
Oh, okay.
Like the JavaScript conference.
Doesn't it have a name though, like a proper name? Actually, wait up. Could we even get a Jonathan Neal recorded voiceover telling us all about this conference, please?
I bet we could.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So, that's our pre-recorded voiceover for the JavaScript conference, brought to you by Jonathan Neal. I don't actually know what he just said, and so I'm going to tell you that they're going back to the Hotel Palomar, which is, I liked it because the bar and the conference room were all on the same floor. So we just sort of wandered in between them, and it was a really excellent venue and nice place to stay too. So yay, JSConf. And
whoever was the architect on that conference building did a great job putting the bar next to the
there was
area.
the bar, there was the patio, there was the conference, there was the hack room, and
that's like forward thinking.
Somebody brought beer to the
max.
hack room, and it was kind of perfect. So Chris Williams put this on last year, and it was just amazing, and we're all going to be there this year, and we can't wait. So sign up. Hurry up.
Speaking of forms that are online, we have a poll because we want to find out more about you, our yayQuery audience. We released our little poll last week. It's still up online, and if you haven't taken it yet, we still want to put you on our list.
We want you to.
And what was the title of this poll?
It was called Who the Yay Are You? You could find it at bit.ly.yayqlp for listener poll.
Nice.
That's what that stood for. I didn't know.
That's nice.
Nice.
Can I also give a yayQuery shout out and thanks to our friend Pete Higgins at Dojo, who sent me personally,
some of us,
this great Dojo mug, which is absolutely delicious. Filled with this little, I guess this is a confetti popper, which is delicious.
You didn't tell us that.
A Dove milk chocolate peanut butter Snickers, and then this was my favorite. I really like this one. This is a, let me get this on camera. This is what looks to appear to be a little chocolate wrapped in foil, except it's not. It's part of the foil is ripped off, so I'm sure that, well, it actually smells delicious, and I want to eat it, but it isn't really quite covered.
But it was unwrapped, and so you're afraid?
Yeah, I mean, should I eat an unwrapped candy that came from Dojo?
I bet he trapped it first.
If anything sounds suspect, it's Pete Higgins poisoning a jQuery team member's candy. It's like the candy apple and Snow White.
I don't know, right?
See, I don't think.
Okay, right?
I don't think that Pete would do that kind of thing. I think he would probably delegate that off to some other person because he wouldn't want to get his hands dirty with that. But Pete's not the only one who can delegate things. jQuery is adding delegation and undelegation into jQuery core. You may remember last week that we had a discussion about live and how that could possibly be nuanced and made more to people's liking. So I think Paul's going to tell us a little bit more about that.
So exactly. So we had a nice big discussion about Live and what the faults of it were. We already covered this, so I'm not going to review it. But basically, a lot of the people that were having this discussion got in a room with John Resig of IRC channel, really, and figured it out. And John was like, you know what, guys, let me try and hack out a solution to this. And so we came out with this API, and it's basically you grab the root context of where you want your delegation to be. So with Live, this usually defaults actually to the document, but it's a lot better to choose a very specific context. So you'll say like the body element isn't very specific, so you want to get a little bit closer, lower down on the DOM, and then so you'll do that element, delegate, click, and then the selector of what actually you want to capture the clicks of, and then the function handler that you want. So that's basically how it works. It's going to have a massive performance improvement, and it's also going to fix a lot of the API weirdness that was introduced that we currently are dealing with Live. So I'm really looking forward to using this as my primary transport for all my delegation going forward.
And Paul,
looks really.
I always have a question, Paul. When are we going to see this?
This will be
it's not
in
out yet, right?
This is in 1.4.2, which will be coming in the next week and a half, basically. It'll be out. Okay. It'll be out very soon.
Alex,
Awesome.
please continue with your smooth transition.
Well, that's the thing is like Adam's had so many great transitions. He takes one item that we're talking about and he fuses it directly into the next one. Which brings me to my next point. Fuse.js Alpha is released this week. John David Dalton, who I just hung out with this past weekend, decided, hey, I promised everyone a release at any stage in February, or by the end of January, I think was his actual promise, and he lived up to it. It is on GitHub, and you should check it out. It's jdalton/Fuse.js. It is a nifty library. It kind of it takes his sandbox natives. It takes some of his selector engine options that he really likes, and some of his really smart techniques. And it's just it's kind of a totally different approach to a lot of things.
And I think we can say that it comes as a fork from Prototype. So it's based off of the kind of Prototype philosophy of augmenting the JavaScript language as opposed to the jQuery fixes the DOM APIs thing. So it really focuses on language, but it addresses a lot of the major complaints that people had with Prototype, and then it also is extremely performant. So it's cool.
Yeah, it actually forked a part of Prototype from about February of 2008. So there's quite a bit of development split between the two libraries, and specifically the modifying object prototype is not done because of the Fusebox stuff. And you should all check out his Sandbox Natives talks. There's even jQuery plugins and stuff that he's got going to do that for you as well. It's really pretty nifty to get Sandbox Natives into your stuff if you need them.
Alex, can you explain what a Sandbox Native is?
I can. So a Sandbox Native is, well, I'll go back. A native is something like object. It's something like array or function or any of these built-in types to jQuery, even though they kind of all extend from object to begin with. And they all have prototypes. And so Prototype messes with those prototypes, and that means anything that you're dealing with in the language is going to get messed with. It's the object.prototype is verboten. That's what it is, right?
Yep, it's verboten.
Verboten. Yeah. So what he does is he uses a series of techniques. I won't go into them, but he pretty much grabs someone else's natives, a different page's natives or an ActiveX object's natives, and pulls those in, and then you modify those, and then he can kill all that stuff and not leak memory or anything like that. And it works cross-browser. and it's really nifty that you could pretty much load prototype into this sandbox, and it's not going to have any conflicts with the rest of your code. And that's part of the premise that Fuse.js is built on, along with a lot of other awesome stuff.
Speaking of awesome stuff, that's
not up to par. Not up to par.
That was kind of a stock transition, I gotta say.
Wow.
But that's why I let you do it instead of me, because I didn't know what
Thanks,
to do.
Rebecca. All right, so James Podolsky, you might be familiar of Podolsky in such films as yayQuery episode 12? Episode 11?
I think it was 11.
11.
The 12th
14 days of
episode.
James Podolsky.
Our last episode. No, wait! It was two ago.
No!
Don't worry. I'm going to start this all over again. Okay, so James came out with a little source viewer, basically. And so, essentially the idea is that you just type in the function that you're interested in, and it shows you the formatted source of that function as it appears inside the jQuery source. So it's a nice API, a nice little viewer for browsing the source. So if you want to look up how something is implemented, nice and pretty.
But can't I just view the jQuery source?
Well, thanks for asking that, Dion Almer. Yes, absolutely you can. You can just view the... of course. I mean, yeah. Couldn't you? Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we just view the source?
I think the problem that James had with just viewing the source is that, say you're looking for the height method, I think the word height shows up in the jQuery source more than one time, to say the least. So if you type that into his API viewer, you'll get the actual height method.
I will point out, for the people that like looking at the source, that basically if you type in any method name followed by a colon immediately after that, for 95% of the methods in jQuery that works. For bind, height, and width it does not. But for everything else, basically, it does. So, anyways, James's source viewer is really slick, and it also has multiple versions just built into it. So it's very sweet to browse around the API.
The API?
The API!
What about the API, Paul? Am I supposed to say something about the API?
Yeah.
Let's just say you wanted to browse the API.
What's a website you could use?
What is a website you could use? Well, not to knock any of the work that Paul and all the other team members did putting together the new, awesome, brilliant, gorgeous API, API.jQuery.com website. But somebody, I honestly don't know who. Do we know who?
Yeah,
It goes by the handle JQAPI.
No.
Okay,
Use jQuery.
It goes by Use jQuery. He has the Use jQuery Twitter account.
Okay.
And he's like,
what do I know?
Yeah, he's some guy.
So the Use jQuery guy came out with a jQAPI.com site, and it's kind of just a different approach to interacting with the jQuery API. It's a little bit kind of more like the old site, which the new site isn't that different from the old site, but it's neat.
It's actually it's very similar to Remy Sharp's API browser, which has not yet been updated, and I think that's why he came out with this. But it's
very light on its feet, though.
Yeah.
It's light on its feet.
It's
got it's got a slightly different presentation of the documentation itself, and it's got a different navigation for the documentation. So check it out, jqapi.com, because it may be a more pleasant way for you to interact with the docs than api.jquery.com. So yeah.
For anyone who's used to the ext documentation, it's similar, just not quite as slow, and it doesn't load 300 kilobytes. Just never mind.
And speaking of documentation, I just want to let y'all know on a little goodie I dropped into the map documentation today.
That was awesome.
Yeah, a badass little one-liner plugin that I wrote a long time ago called Equalize Heights, which just given a bunch of elements, it makes them all be the maximum height of the maximum element. Anyways, really slick little guy, and I just put him into the documentation because map needs Map needs some love, and it's a powerful boy.
Map, like, I don't think to use it nearly as much as I should, and then I realize I should, and it's if you haven't looked into Map, you should look into Map.
Yeah, it was funny. I was telling Carl that I was putting it in, Carl Swedberg, and he was like, honestly, I don't even know like when to use Map. And I was like, Carl, like Carl who writes the books on the documentation doesn't know like their proper use cases.
I'm sure he appreciates you bringing that up.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. But I think
he was speaking figuratively.
Yep.
I think it's a really familiar thing to like Ruby people, I guess, or Rails people. But
I took all my Map inspiration from AJ, so.
It's actually kind of a functional programming paradigm.
All right. What do I know?
Yeah. Now, Paul, I know that you like have a bunch of nifty one-liner plugins, but you're not the only one who makes his plugin source available online, because that's how you have to distribute things, but then might be a victim of hot linking. We know that this happened to Douglas Crockford. I know that our good friend Mike Taylor does it on his very useful jQuery nightly and hourly builds that are available online. We'll link those. But if there's a brand new tool that came out today called Hotlinker, which pretty much allows you to prevent people from, not prevent people, but sort of punish people for hot linking to your scripts. You can pornify, you can bring up a nasty alert. I don't know. Maybe you can just do a while loop while true. But that would be pretty nefarious. But also in the tradition of interesting projects, this is from digitalbush.com, who is another guy who doesn't tell you a word about who he is. digitalbush.com, hotlinker. Check it out.
I'm just another developer trying to do his thing. That's what he says about him. So, Alex, you had a little speaking engagement over the weekend, this past weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I spoke at Developer Day Austin, which is one of many, and I spoke on the topic of JavaScript inheritance. It was entitled Super Classy Inheritance in JavaScript, I believe. You can search for Super Classy, and I come up third on Google. Just saying. What's
1 and 2?
I didn't check. It didn't matter to me. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, I rank higher. But anyways, my slides are up. Yeah, my slides are up. I link it on my blog, alexsexton.com. Pretty much, I talk about how I like to develop and how I think is a good strategy for especially large application development, using inheritance in order to build a well-coupled, loosely but smartly coupled jQuery plugin for development. So you have all your objects and stuff like that, and your program works on its own, and then you link that in a small jQuery plugin. You kind of link the API, and that's kind of what I talk about and how JavaScript inheritance works and all that kind of stuff. But it was great. We'll link the slide share and stuff like that. But I think
the slide. I was just going to say the slide share really made me wish that I had been there to see the talk, and I hope that maybe you'll make a screencast out of it or something, because just neat stuff for people to know as far as code organization and just principles of JavaScript inheritance. And
yeah, absolutely.
Plus, there was a really sweet picture of you all backlit in front of the in front of the screen. That was nice.
Backlit, just how speakers should be lit at a presentation. Yeah, it wasn't exactly. Yeah. Isn't there one coming up in North Carolina as well? Dev Day by Viget.
Well, gosh, Alex, how did you know that? You're just psychic. Yes, we have a developer day coming up in Durham on February 27th, and I don't know. Yours is fun. Ours was fun last year, and I bet it's going to be fun again this year, and so you should come. So developer-day.com. The Viget people are just fabulous people, and they do all sorts of stuff here. Viget.
I guess they are in
Yeah.
the South.
Viget.
So I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, we
No,
figured
I
it out.
thought it
It'd
was.
be weird to have a French pronunciation.
Yeah, I
So,
thought it was
at least in
Vijay,
Sexton.
and then I talked to them, and they cleared that all
What?
up for me. It's Viget,
Viget,
like
vigor?
vigor. That's their
Bigger.
yes, yes,
Or
Like spigot?
like spigot,
like
Okay,
any
like
number
vigor
of
and
words.
spigot.
vigor and spigot.
Portmanteau of vigor and spigot.
It's a vigorous spigot of
Programming develop. Anyways, I'd like.
Anyway.
Okay, we're stopping that. And we're moving on to something vastly more important. As many of you know, Lost
Yes.
came back into our lives
Best
this
ever.
week, the television show.
Yay.
I'm pretty sure Paul attended a party
Yeah.
with John Rezig just
Yeah.
to watch it together. It was like 4 hours long, and you loved it. So,
Guys,
as
can
many
you
of
hold-
In the
Guys.
future, which is now the past.
so
The party
I-
line's ringing. Guys, the party line is ringing.
So
It's
call
going-
now, and this will be you. I know it doesn't make sense, but we set up the time loop theory. It's gonna come in. Adam's gonna get it now. I promise this will work. Dial your phones 4434 yayQuery right now.
Right now.
Got it?
Hello, yayQuery team. My question is regarding the use of the try-catch statement. I'm working on some code where it has been used liberally throughout. Think querying the DOM and then manipulating the CSS on an element. That wrapped in a try-catch statement. I see this and frequently wonder, what good can come of this? What are we going to catch? Further, if something is caught, I'm really unsure of what to do with the resulting information. I typically would prefer it would just fail on the specific line it failed on. Now, I do use try-catch on XHR requests just to catch any that have failed to go through, but I'm unclear of the general use of the try-catch statement, and I'm hoping you guys can clarify. Thanks much. Bye.
That was like our
Probably.
best yayQuery party line question yet.
No offense to Chris
no.
McCullough.
No
We
offense,
have-
I'm
We have
sorry.
another
Oh.
Come on,
video
Rebecca, you can't just do
party
that.
line call that we got to air sometime soon. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
Chris,
absolutely.
Chris, I love you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was rude.
That was-
But
We're
but
sorry.
thank you
But that
very
was
much
like an
for the call.
in-depth
So let's
question.
talk.
Call.
Let's break this into parts. We have the try-catch statement, right? And you got to use them together. You gotta, right? I think you gotta. And the other gotta is that you always have to name the argument that gets passed in the catch. You can't just do catch paren. Browsers will blow up at that. Okay, so you say that you see try-catches around grabbing elements and changing CSS properties on them. That is definitely not needed. There's no reason that will throw some sort of error. Just manipulating the style property of an element. You can pass it all sorts of stuff, and it's not really going to blow up at all on you. And then you also mentioned that you have a try-catch around XHR statements, XHR requests, so that you can catch if one of them times out. And I'm pretty sure that you're not going to be able to catch, an XHR will time out, and it won't throw any sort of exception or throw an error. It'll just time out, and you can receive that in other ways. But the main use cases that I have for a try-catch is basically when you need to execute some code and it may cause an error, and you either want to execute it regardless and kind of shield the browser from that error, or you want to handle that error in another way. Maybe you want to pipe it into your error reporting. A few use cases that I have, I needed to detect if Flash was present, so I needed to basically create an ActiveX object in IE to see that. And I wrapped it in a try because I'm testing ActiveX. Also, when I'm interacting with a Flash, like an object, and I'm passing methods, calling methods on the Flash, I'll usually do those in a try-catch. Anything where you want that extra protection. is something where it might be useful. But avoid it if you can, because the try-catch comes with a pretty hefty performance hit for any use. So it's not like, you certainly don't want to be wrapping your entire execution code in a try-catch.
So, Paul, just a couple of things. One, I know that Nicholas Sakis wrote some great stuff about doing error handling, and the art of throwing JavaScript errors was the title of his blog post. And so we'll have links to that. And if you want to know more about try and catch, then that's a great resource. The other thing I was going to ask is, does a try catch always have to involve a throw? You know, we often see, like, well, we don't often see, but in libraries you'll see throw, and you throw an error. Does a try catch always have to involve throwing
as far
an
as
error?
does something have to be thrown for
Does your own code have to throw an
Everyone
error
else
for a
wants
try
take
catch
this-
to
I'm
work?
coughing, so
Are you dying there? Go for it, Al.
Paul Irish, dying Paul Irish would have said that technically yes, but in practice no. So you don't have to throw something, but the browser can natively throw one of these arrows. So a throw has to happen at some point in the chain, but you don't ever have to see one in any of the code that you're running. That can happen from JavaScript itself. JavaScript throws errors itself.
exactly.
That's exactly what you were going to say.
Yeah.
So what shouldn't I be using try catch for? I shouldn't be using it like if I think that I might have written code with syntax errors, or I'm just kind of a little uneasy about the code that I just wrote. That's not what I'm trying to catch.
So
it's not
one
me.
One of the more well-known try catches is in the DOM content loaded function by Diego Perini, when he tests to see if IE is ready and has loaded the DOM, and he actually tests, is doScroll, the property doScroll, present in document. That property is only present when the DOM is ready. So basically he puts that inside of a try, and on the catch he basically recursively calls it again and again and again and again. There's really no way to do that. You need to test that in a try catch. My recommendation is don't code anything with a try catch unless you just don't code it like that by default. If your code is popping up with an error on edge cases and you have no way at all to wrap some safetyness around it, then it might be a proponent or a prospective use case for it. But I don't know that we can say any times when it's the right time to use a try catch.
I think
not in day-to-day code.
I think a lot of times the time I would use a try catch is whenever you're getting data from some sort of outside source that you can't verify follows some sort of standard. So it's explicitly in, say, like a JSON.parse. JSON.parse, if the data is invalid, so if they aren't quoting their keys and you use the native JSON.parse, it's going to throw an error. Actually, if you just use 1.41.parse, it's going to throw an error. It explicitly throws an error on that. So you would have to catch anytime you're using jQuery.parse. So that'd be a good use case. A bad use case, another one, would be, say, the Thickbox plugin.
We love to beat up on them.
So our favorite Thickbox plugin out of all one Thickbox plugins that exists actually wraps pretty much the entire thing in that, and that's kind of just like a, hey, I might have wrote bad code and this is going to catch any errors that way. It doesn't show to everyone using it, and we'd say that's the exact wrong case. And it sounds like, via your question, that's kind of whatever developer kind of originally wrote that was doing, was just wrapping around anything that could be necessarily wrong. So I think we're going to move forward. We wanted to bring it down a notch for our beginner users, which by our poll so far are less than we thought. You guys are all geniuses, so this is for you nobodies out there.
It's not for you nobodies. It's just for you who didn't answer the survey yet, which I'm sure you will, to tell us how much you love the Beginner's Corner segment. So this week we're going to talk about bind and live and what the difference is and how live works.
Rebecca, so many times
what?
I read about bind or events. What are these jQuery? I am not understand what these are for, and I hear delegate. I wish I could understand these jQuery. Can you explain?
I have code.
Well, Adam, your broken English leads me to believe that you need guidance here. So,
please, sir or madam.
I love when people call me sir or dude. That's the best on the IRC channel. I love that. So, yeah. Yeah, so jQuery 1.4 kind of made live this really mostly viable thing. So people are paying a lot more attention to it than they were before, and asking on the IRC channel, like, when do I use this and when do I use bind, and not really necessarily understanding what the difference is between them. So I just wanted to talk a minute about what live actually does. I think sometimes people see it as this weird black box replacement for bind, and they don't really understand why. But we kind of alluded to this earlier in the show with delegate and undelegate. All that live is doing is just it takes the selector that you pass in, and then it watches. It takes a selector, and then it takes the event that you want to watch. So say that you want to watch for all the clicks on A elements, A tags. Instead of binding that click event to individual A tags, what it actually does is it watches all the clicks that happen to the document itself. And when those clicks happen, it looks at the element that triggered the event and looks to see whether it was an A. So it looks to see whether it matched the selector that you passed in to begin with. And this way, as you add new elements to your page, you don't have to constantly be binding your event to these new elements. You can just, jQuery automatically just watches all the events that are happening to the document itself and checks to see whether they match the selector. And
so jQuery is traverse the DOM all the time, make loop, and understand what's on page?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
No. We had somebody in the channel today who was talking about polling the DOM constantly to see if something new had been added. And no. I mean, this is what's so gorgeous about live, is that we don't have to do that. It just automatically, it's not attaching anything to the A elements themselves, and that's the thing to sort of understand with live versus bind. When you use bind, it goes through your DOM and it finds all of the elements that match the selector, and it says it attaches a click event to or whatever event to every single one of them. And so if you have 100 A's in your page, then that can take some time, and then when you add some new ones, it's a problem. But with live, it just attaches one event to the document, and when that event happens to the document, it looks to see if the element if one of the elements that event happened to matched your selector. And what's really cool now, how
I can make an event delegation myself.
How make you event delegation, please?
Please.
Is that what you're asking?
Please.
Please?
Yes.
Well, it just so happens that I've written a pasty that shows you how to do this yourself, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
Why, you're welcome. Now, delegate and undelegate kind of makes this whole pasty moot, but it does demonstrate what exactly is going on here. So I created a pasty. We'll have a link to it from the show. But it basically shows how you can do this whole event delegation thing. And instead of attaching it to the document using live, you can attach it to an element that might be closer to the elements that you're trying to keep an eye on. So you could attach a click event to an unordered list, and that click event could be delegated to the individual list items in the list. So it could figure out which list item was clicked and do something according to which list item was clicked, but you only bind to the unordered list, not to the individual list items. So we have a pasty that shows how you might do that, sort of gives you a little bit more insight into how live actually works, and how you can use it yourself.
It's the plugin of the week, and it's really, really great. It's the plugin of the week. Yeah!
This week's plugin of the week is from jQuery UI. It is the position utility widget. It is so freaking cool. It blows my mind. We mentioned it before, but what the position widget lets you do is just position any element in relationship to any other element using a sentence that's pretty much like speaking English. Position my top at the bottom of div main, or position my bottom 10 pixels off of the bottom of the window element. So it's used in autocomplete. It's used in I think the menu. It's used for tooltip. A lot of these things are more experimental than others. But you can also use the position plugin to move things around the page. If you want to pop up a context menu, if you want to move something around when you drag, if you just want to put a modal on the page, the position widget is really
the big really like
really
sweet feature of it is that
cool.
it's viewport cognizant, right? So like knows where the edges of the viewport are and adjusts. So if you had like this drop down menu whatever that like kept on dropping down, flying out, it knows when it hits the edge of the viewport, and it's going to adjust and switch around. So it's sweet.
Yeah, sweet collision detection methods. So even as we anticipate jQuery UI 1.8, the position widget itself is pretty G to G, good to go. However, one thing that's not good to go is doing things in a terrible way, which brings us to
Irish
jQuery.
All Irish's jQuery.
Anti-pattern for performance of the week.
Bum bum.
This week's
It is.
anti-pattern of the week,
Paul.
for the week, of the week, WEAK. All right. So we're gonna take a look at some code. So I'm gonna ask you, if you're sitting at your computer, I'm gonna ask you to bring this up right here. This is at bit.ly/j.
OMG lols JS. OMG
Yeah,
LOLZ
it's right there.
JS.
So I hope we get that. All right. So this is some real world code that we picked up from the IRC channel, and there's a lot that's going on in here that it is not a great way to do it. But what we're going to focus on here is handling some hover stuff. So this developer wanted to grab all these unit elements, and when we hover into them, we're going to do some stuff. When we hover out of them, we're going to do some stuff. Now, if you're looking at this, you might notice that it's kind of the same sort of stuff, right? We're adding classes, and we're traversing through these other things, and we're going to add a class or remove a class, and well, that's really all it is. And really, it's the same code, just reversed, right? So we're adding or removing. I think we mentioned this before, but when you're adding and removing in different states, it's a lot easier to use toggle class and pass it a Boolean. So what we did is we took this piece of code and we rewrote it using a different style. And so basically, a more optimized approach to writing this is so that you're not duplicating your code. Pass hover only a single function. This function will be used for both mouse enter and mouse leave. Those are the events that hover is typically bound to. Do you have a question, Rebecca? Smart.
Why, yes. How did you know? You're smart like that. Well, my question was just this hover and being able to pass it as a single
This
function.
is actually new in 1.4.
This is new?
Yes, indeed. And being able to pass, you can now call live hover and pass that as single function as of 1.4.1.
Oh.
So, yeah. But inside of it, the event.type will be either mouse enter or mouse leave. It's not going to be hover. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Is inside of it, we're going to check, is it mouse enter? And if it is, we're gonna set a little Boolean flag, and then basically we're going to do the same sort of traversing that we did before, but we're going to use the end method to pop our stack back to a previous selection, so that we don't have to traverse up and down the same way each time. And just take a look at these two code examples, look them over, and you should be able to get an idea on how you can actually reduce both the amount that you repeat yourself and also make it quite a bit faster by being smart about things.
One other thing we want to mention in terms of working with hover. The hover event can happen somewhat magically. Sometimes the user's just moving around real quick, and if you're doing something in a hover event, like a bunch of DOM traversal, or especially popping out or creating new elements or showing and hiding elements, it's a good idea to use something like hover intent or jQuery event special hover, or even manually debounce your hovers, so that you're only firing your hover logic when the user really means to have put his or her mouse, over the element. So we'll probably get into more depth about debouncing and all this kind of stuff in another episode, but it's really worth noting that when you're working with hover, it happens by mistake a lot, and you kind of want to make sure that your code checks for that.
Great.
Another thing you want to check for is the end of the yayQuery podcast. Some ways you can do that are you can listen for the music that kind of comes in under my voice. You can kind of check the time code and see if we're getting close to the end. So if any of you are doing that, you notice that now's that time. So we would like to remind you that JSConf is coming up, and
we're
we
gonna
want
be there.
you to go to it because it's awesome.
And we want to hang out.
And we're going to be there. And we may even get to answer a few of your questions in a podcast there, which would be super exciting. We'd like to thank our sponsors, TinyCDN, for your content delivery needs. That's not what the N stands for, but and then Devotee for your expression engine help and to modules and stuff. A lot of stuff. Anyways, we'd like to remind you not to pick stupid answers on Stack Overflow, and to have a good week or whatever till we come out again. Thanks, guys. Bye.